Hello everyone, I am Dr. Priyank J. Sharma, Assistant Professor at IIT Indore, and I welcome you all to this NPTEL course, Climate Hazards and Disaster Mitigation. This is one of a unique course which we have designed to provide a perspective on what are the different climate hazards and how their disaster mitigation efforts or strategies can be formulated. So in this course, we will have an overview about starting with the concepts of hazards, disaster, vulnerability, understanding what is climate change, climate variability, and gradually moving on to data collection aspects. What are the data collection, what is the role of GIS in disaster mitigation, and discussing each of the major climate related hazards like floods, drought, heat wave, cold wave in detail, and further look into what are the disaster mitigation frameworks, strategies, and that can be put into regional or global perspectives, and then design the entire syllabus such that we will be able to equip you to analyze these kind of disasters, to formulate the mitigation strategies, and also we provide at the end some inputs on how climate change would affect this disaster, what is the role of big data and AI in preparing any kind of disaster mitigation plan, and so on. So it is an extensive 36 lecture course where we provide all perspectives about what are the different climate hazards and their modeling as well. And today we are going to start with our first introductory lecture, where we discuss or provide an introduction to the climate hazards and disasters. So in this lecture, our learning objectives are: we will understand the basic concepts and classification of climate hazards and disaster. We will examine the characteristics and impacts of major climate related hazards. We will also discuss the prominent geophysical hazards and their linkages with climate hazards, and we will analyze the global and national scenarios for various hazards and discuss the major disasters. So to begin with, we start with the definition of hazard, that what is a hazard. So hazard is a process, phenomena or human activity that may cause loss of life, injury or health impacts, damage the properties or social and economic disruptions, or even sometimes lead to environmental disruptions. On the other hand, disaster is the disruption of the functioning of any community or society at any given scale due to a hazardous event which took place, but it has to interact with the conditions of exposure, vulnerability and capacity, which can lead to one or more of the following impacts, that is either human, material, economic or environmental losses. To simplify this definition, hazard is one that represents any potential threat, while disaster is a consequence of a hazard occurring and causing an impact. To give an example in this narrative, for example, we go at one place where there is a excavation happened for some construction activity, and that is not guarded, so that a pit is left unguarded. So it is a potential hazard that anyone who does not notice can fall in that pit and sustain some injury. So that is an hazard. But if that is properly protected or signs are put, then people are aware about it and they will not fall into that pit. But if it is an unguarded pit and on passers who are going by that area, they are not aware on dark time, they may fall in that pit, and that turns into a potential disaster. So thing which translates hazard into disaster, that is exposure. So exposure is very important. Without exposure, it is not translated. For another example, we take from the climate perspective, there is an island which is deserted, there is no population on it. Irrespective, that island receives lot of rainfall, so extreme rainfall is very predominant. So considering from the human point of view, since there are no population or no human settlements, even though extreme rainfall is a hazard, but it will not turn into disaster because of that exposure or the vulnerable population is missing. So in a nutshell, not all hazards can lead to disasters. The key factor that turns hazard to disaster is its impact on a vulnerable population. So that is very important. Now hazards can be either natural, anthropogenic or socio-natural in origin. So natural hazards are those which are prominently associated with natural processes or phenomena, while the anthropogenic hazards, or which is also called as the human induced hazards, are predominated by human activities and choices. The term does not include the risk of armed conflicts or any kind of social instability or terrorist activities, or that are a certain condition that lead to either humanitarian laws or national legislation. So our hazards exclude these kind of terms. Now socio-natural hazards are a combination of the first two categories, that is natural and anthropogenic hazards, where there are combination of natural and anthropogenic factors which include environmental degradation and climate change. Now disaster, we saw that there is a lot of disruption in the functioning of community. Now if we see the effect of a disaster, either the effect can be immediate and localized, or it can be widespread and for a longer period of time. So there are some disasters which are very immediate and affecting a very small region, but there are some disasters like heat waves or droughts, they are very widespread and it could last for a long period of time. Now the effect of a given disaster may be tested when it exceeds the capacity of a community or society to cope its own resources. For example, if a particular area, if there is a house which is getting flooded, so that hazard is turning into a disaster and the community may get wiped out. But let us say if the community is on a particularly very high terrain, so even if there is lot of flow or flood which is happening, that houses or the community is not affected. So in one way the community is resilient enough that it has its own resources to cope up with this disaster, and it does not require any external assistance unless and otherwise the water levels do not encroach this particular community. Now all communities, for example, if we consider recent events of floods in Punjab, or there are past events of earthquake in some parts of the country. So what happens in such kind of events? In case of floods, the people who are affected by floods do not get water, or they do not get essential supplies like foods and medicines. So even though they had all that in their region, because of floods everything was washed out, so now they do not have the capacity to cope up with its resources. So they require further assistance from external sources, which could be in state government, central government, or United Nations or any other disaster relief measures. So either there are national or international agencies which will help in the disaster mitigation efforts. Now coming to exposure, what is exposure? Now populations and society, they need to be exposed to hazard to be affected by it. So as I told in the earlier discussion, so if nobody is affected by that hazard, it is not a disaster. So there has to be some exposure of population or society to that hazard. Now they can either directly or indirectly be affected. So direct effects include some kind of injury, illness, health effects, evacuation and displacement, social, economical or cultural or environmental damages. Indirect effects, they are referring to additional consequences over time that cause unsafe or unhealthy conditions from economic, infrastructure, social, health or psychological point of view. So these are the indirect effects. Now the major challenge in our disaster research is to measure who has been affected and when. This is a very gray area when we talk about disaster research. Now we present a classification of natural hazards. Classification of hazards. The first one is natural category, where you have a geophysical hazard, where earthquake, your volcanic activity or a geophysically triggered mass movement like landslides, they come under the natural hazard, where subgroup is a geophysical hazard. Hydrological hazards are very common, and this is the area of our focus in this course, where flood wave action, hydrometeorological triggered mass movements, these all come under the hydrological hazards. Meteorological, they are storms. Storms essentially implies heavy rainfall or extreme rainfall activity. It can also use cloudburst, include cloudburst phenomena, extreme temperature, that again comes under meteorological hazards. Climatological, you have drought, wildfire, glacial lake outbursts, these are all the climatological hazards. And the last one is a biological, which includes air, water and vector-borne diseases, any animal and plant diseases or outbreak of virus or antimicrobial resistant microorganism. These all come under the biological hazards. In further slides, we will see in detail each of these hazards. There are extraterrestrial hazards which may impact space and weather. So these are predominantly some kind of asteroid or meteorite impact that will come under this particular category. Next, you have human induced hazards. They are the technological hazards, like there is some hazard in an industry, predominantly a petroleum or a thermal power industry or nuclear power facility. You have a structural collapse due to any improper construction, the bridge might collapse, so that is again a human induced hazard. You have air pollution due to stubble burning or any other vehicular pollution that comes into this. So recent times you saw that Delhi, it was almost people were not coming out due to severe air pollution. Infrastructure disruption, cyber security is again one such area. You have hazardous material like radiological or food contamination. Then next is the societal conflicts, which will include your armed conflict, civil unrest, financial crisis, terrorism, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear weapons. Next is the environmental degradation. So you have erosion, deforestation, salinization, wetland loss, desertification, glacier retreat. So these all come under the environmental degradation. So this is as per the classification provided by World Health Organization, WHO, and very comprehensive classification covering all kinds of natural hazards. Coming into detail each class, geophysical hazards, they are those which are originating from inside the earth due to any kind of activity that is happening. So that could be as a result of a geophysical, geological or tectonic activity. So the dynamic nature of Earth's crust has resulted in this geophysical hazard. So as you can see in this image, that due to this tectonic movements, there is magma which is coming out, and that may cause volcanic eruptions. Also due to collision of tectonic plates, there might be earthquakes which are resulting in that, and the earthquakes, if they are happening below the ocean, so that can also trigger tsunamis as well. So your earthquake, volcanic eruption, landslides, these all come under your geophysical hazards. Meteorological hazards, these are the hazards which are caused by short-lived small to mesoscale atmospheric processes. So the examples are thunderstorm and lightning. So thunderstorm and lightning occur for a very short period of time, and they are due to this atmospheric destabilization or processes. Hydrological hazards, they are prominently caused because of the imbalance which is created in the hydrologic cycle, where there are a lot of irregularities observed in the hydrological cycle, and that tends to overflow the bodies or water caused due to wind setup. So that may result in very high waves, or which is also called storm surge. That is in the ocean. What is happening, that due to wind action and cyclonic storm, so the waves will go very high, and that will cause inundation, particularly in coastal areas. So in coastal areas, the storm surge is very predominant. Now floods are due to swelling up of rivers or local water bodies, or it can be due to a cloud burst. So there are several things, but all come under the hydrological hazards. Climatological hazards, now these are some which are caused by the long-lived or meso to macro scale atmospheric processes. So the time spectrum is from intra-seasonal to multi-decadal climate variability. Examples are heat wave, which is caused due to excess temperature extremes. So where the high temperatures prolong over a certain period of time, they result in heat wave. Droughts are due to deficit of soil moisture or water availability that leads to droughts, and wildfires. Usually heat waves and droughts may both trigger wildfires, where dry soils or dry vegetation are more susceptible to fires. So these all come under the climatological hazards. Biological hazards, they are caused due to exposure of living organisms to germs and toxic substances. So you have epidemic, pest infestation or community diseases. So your SARS virus or COVID virus or swine flu or these kind of things, they are more under the biological hazards. Coming to the another classification of natural hazards, so we saw that natural hazards are common occurring from extreme or common physical processes. So the examples are earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, hurricanes. So natural hazards are again classified into two: either they are hydrometeorological or atmospheric driven hazards like floods and droughts, or they are geophysical or geological triggered hazards like earthquakes, tsunami or volcanic eruptions. Social hazards are those which originate within a social system and which are primarily caused or aggravated by human actions. So common examples are famines, social conflicts, wars, complex emergencies, etc. Now famine is most often seen as synonymous to drought, but it is not exactly synonymous to drought. Famines are something different, and where the human involvement is there. So there is a article by Amartya Sen which shows that the Great Bengal famine of 1943 was not due to shortage of food or due to any kind of preceding drought, but it was due to anthropogenic and socio-political factors which led to unequal distribution, hoarding and policy failures. So during this British era, we faced lot of famines. Now what Britishers used to do as a measure to punish the citizens, they used to hoard the food grains and will not provide the people with adequate food grains, and that created a big famine kind of condition where many people lost their lives. So this is a kind of a social hazard, not of a climatic hazard. So many times there are inherent political or multifaceted nature of problems which make these social hazards more complex to address and resolve. Next is the biological hazards. Now these originate from various biological agents like virus, bacteria, etc. So as discussed earlier, so your AIDS, foot and mouth disease, SARS, Ebola, swine flu, these all come under the biological hazards. Technological hazards. So technological hazards are often their origination is attributed to interaction of society, technology and natural systems. So a combination of them govern the technological hazards. One example is the Chernobyl disaster which happened due to radiation leak. Bhopal gas tragedy in India, that also happened due to human negligence or technological failure. So industrial hazards, we have Bhopal gas tragedy. Structural collapse, like there is a flyover collapse as we discussed, so that is again a structural collapse. Nuclear hazard which happened in Chernobyl. There was another nuclear leak which happened when there was a tsunami in Japan. So the nuclear reactor which was very close to the coastline were feared to have some leakage. And the computer hazard, which are ransomware attack which happened in India in 2017. Transportation hazard, where there is a collision of some trains happening. So these all come under the technological hazard. Because of any signal failure or signal malfunction, the this kind of activities happen. Last is a chronic hazard. So they are long-term events or cyclical events which happen. These are all very cyclic in nature, or also termed as elusive hazards because they are very hard to identify. They originate because of repeated exposures but very little perceivable impact in time and space, like riverine erosion, food insecurity, land degradation, soil piping, etc. So here you can see that year by year the water flows in this channel and it tends to cut some parts of the land, and in larger period it will erode these banks. So there is a very famous island. So there is a Majuli island in Assam that was the largest freshwater island. So it had area something greater than 1100 kilometer square. Due to this riverine erosion, the mighty Brahmaputra river flows on both sides of this island. So the Brahmaputra river was constantly cutting, and that island was almost reduced to half of its size before the authorities noticed and took action. So this kind of hazards are very silent, but their impacts are very perceivable when you go in time. Hazards are also classified on basis of their speed and onset. So you have slow hazard, where the onset time is very slow, example drought and heat waves. You have fast hazard, where the response time is very less or limited, like earthquakes or cloudbursts. So earthquakes, they happen in matter of seconds or milliseconds. Cloudbursts also very short time lived, in few minutes it happened. Medium onset, which is between the fast and slow. So this is not a well defined category, but somewhere between fast and slow we can attribute them, like cyclones and floods. Next is the single event or the chronic event. Single event is like an earthquake, so which does not follow a seasonal or temporal pattern. It can occur very abruptly, while chronic event, which is having a seasonal pattern, like floods and cyclones. So floods and cyclones usually would occur during the floods prominently during the monsoon. Cyclones can be pre or post monsoon, particularly in Indian scenario we are talking about. In global scenarios, floods can be either spring floods or autumn floods. So there they have multi-seasonal floods as well. So moving ahead, the hazards can also be classified based on the spatial characteristics, whether they are concentrated, like floods are concentrated in a very single location, usually they are not widespread. But heat waves, they are very widespread events. They cover geographical locations, either most parts of the country can be under heat wave, or entire continent. There was a famous European heat wave in, I guess, 2023 that covered the entire European continent. So that is another classification. Coming to the climate related hazards, so we have narrowed it down, where when we talk about temperature related hazards, we have heat waves and cold waves. Rainfall related, we have droughts and floods. So one represent deficit, another represent excess, and there are atmospheric and oceanic related hazards, which are cyclones and storm surge. So these will be our major focus of discussion over the course. Coming to the global picture of natural disasters which we see, so compiling some data from the EMDAT database, we saw that the natural hazards, the frequency of natural hazards have increased almost 3 times, from over 1300 events in the duration of 1975 to 84. So in this particular time period, now they have increased to close to 3900 events in this particular time, where you can see this blue chart, that is the hydrological hazards have increases much high as compared to the geophysical hazards, which are more at the same pace or little bit increase, and the climatological hazards. So the hydrological hazards have increased multi-fold. So in this duration, the category 5 storms have almost tripled during this particular duration. Further, we see that over 95% of deaths from natural disasters have come from the developing countries. Why? Because developing countries lack the coping capacity to these disasters, and that is why the deaths are more in the developing countries. The number of people affected by these disasters are also increasing day by day, particularly for the hydrological disasters. Before 1990, the 5-year average did not reach 50 million people, but now it is almost doubled. More than 100 million people are affected. In terms of economic damage, we can see that in $142 billion annually, that is the economical damage in the last 10-year period. That is what we saw, which is a steep increase from $36 billion, which was 2 decades ago. So on the social fronts, on the economic fronts, as well as the environmental fronts, the disasters are portraying a very threatening picture. Coming to flood, flood is a temporary overflow of water onto land that is normally dry. It can result from rain, snow, or coastal storm surge, overflow from rivers, or a dam failure. So flood can cause damage to the buildings and road, can cause power outage, create landslides, etc. So this is a very recent flood image of a flood event in Punjab in 2025. We had several districts in Punjab were submerged under floods which occurred due to incessant heavy rainfall. Another historical disaster which happened in Mumbai flood 2005. So in that 944 millimeters of rainfall occurred in just 24 hours, which disrupted the entire economic capital of India. Another severe flood happened in 2019 in Kolhapur, where you can see excessive heavy rainfall led to submergence of 600 village, 96,000 hectares of farmland was submerged, and economic losses close to 700 crores were observed in this flood. So talking about flood prone area of the country, so here we can see the entire plains of Ganga plains of UP, Bihar, they are very prone to floods, Bengal as well, then Punjab region in Gujarat, that is the mouth of Arabian Sea, and here in coastal Orissa. So these people, so 40 million hectares out of 329 million hectares of India are prone to floods. Major flood events are listed here. You can see that Bihar flood 2008, Mumbai flood 2005, Uttarakhand 2013, which was due to cloudburst and glacial outmelt, Kashmir flood 2017, then Kerala floods 2018, then 2023 you had extreme rainfall induced floods in the northern India states. So these are all the major flood. Coming to next, that is wildfires. Wildfires are the or also known as forest fires, are the uncontrolled fires in vegetation areas which spread rapidly due to heat, wind and dry conditions. So wind is one of the very important factors in propagating this fire. So you can see that the entire forest gets disappeared because of the uncontrolled wildfires. What are the causes? Natural causes are prolonged heat waves and high summer temperature, or due to lightning strikes also. There is, if the trees are dry enough, the lightning can be an ignition for this kind of fires. Human causes are, people are ignorant, they do burning, and that burning, spreads out, and that can take an uncontrolled form. Encroachment mining activity is also responsible for this. Wildfire vulnerable regions, you can see that regions, in particularly Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, are one of the severely affected from wild forest fires. Then apart from that, the Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, they again come under the most vulnerable category. Worst recorded wildfires in 2016 in Uttarakhand, around 4,500 area of land was burned due to drying pine forest and heat waves. In 2019 again Karnataka experienced wildfires, Orissa and Chhattisgarh in 2021, and northeastern states during these years. So out of the forest cover area, you can see that 36% is prone to forest fire. So these forest fires are another kind of climatological hazards which are very significant in our country. Cyclone are large scale air mass movement that rotates around a strong center of low atmospheric pressure. So when we talk about the formation of cyclones in northern hemisphere, it is anti-clockwise, where southern hemisphere it is clockwise. Now they are among the most destructive natural hazards because they combine extreme winds and rainfall. So there is a dual hazard, dual drivers which drive these cyclones, and they have a very strong impact, particularly in the coastal areas where they landfall. So they affect the human life, they affect economy, and lot of infrastructural and agriculture damage they do. Cyclones in India, because India has a very long coastline, around 8,000 kilometers coastline. So the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal makes it one of the world's most cyclone prone regions. Nearly 8% of the world's cyclones affect India. So how the cyclones develop? So initially there is a depression, it translates into deep depression, then a cyclonic storm, severe cyclonic storm, very severe cyclonic storm, extreme severe, and super cyclone. So we can see that this is a classification given by Indian Meteorological Department. When the speeds are greater than 222 km per hour, it is a super cyclonic storm. So as we move up the ladder, the cyclonic category increases. Regional distribution, you can see that Bay of Bengal region, it receives 4 times more cyclones than the Arabian Sea because of the shallow waters and a funnel shape. So here Bay of Bengal has a funnel shape topography, so it is more predominant. Arabian Sea also it gets cyclone, but comparatively less. Seasonality, we see that pre-monsoon, that is May-June season, is one of the seasons where cyclones in this season can disturb or delay the monsoon arrival, while in the post-monsoon season it is mostly due to it is an active season for cyclones, and it is linked to retreat of monsoon or high ocean current. Very rarely you can see the cyclones occurring in off season apart from that, that is due to some disturbances in the ocean. So we can see that based on the data from 1891 to 1990, that is 100 years of data, 92 severe cyclones were on the east coast and just 19. So that is almost 4 times that is what we see. So east coast, particularly Odisha, which is known as the cyclone capital of India, is more vulnerable to cyclones. Major cyclones: Cyclone Philian, which happened in 2013, which affected Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Cyclone Hudhud, which came in 2014, again it affected Andhra Pradesh and Odisha very significantly. These are the major cyclones. The recent one is Taukte and Yas, which Taukte was on the western coast while Yas was on the eastern coast, which created severe economic and social impacts. Coming to the earthquakes, earthquakes is a sudden shaking or trembling of the earth's surface caused by the release of energy stored in the earth crust. It is primarily caused due to tectonic activity. Even volcanic activity can also lead to earthquake. There are some man-made causes, like if there is a mining, severe explosion can also disturb, or dam induced seismicity can, or even some nuclear fission. There are underground nuclear tests that can also cause earthquakes. For example, India did Pokhran nuclear test in 98-99. So the locals felt earthquake tremors due to this nuclear activity. Talking about the earthquake zones, so India is divided into 5 zones, where zone 5 represent the highest risk. So you can see regions like Jammu Kashmir, Himachal, parts of Punjab, Delhi, Uttarakhand, UP, Bihar, entire northeast India and parts of Gujarat, and some in Maharashtra, they come under zone 4 and 5, which are among the high and highest risk. Zone 3 is the moderate risk, so most of the country is in moderate and low risk. So if you are planning any infrastructure in that area, you should consider the earthquake risk in that area. Major earthquake: 2001, the Bhuj earthquake in Gujarat, that was one of the very severe on record. 1993 Latur earthquake was also the severe. So this is a list of the earthquakes which were compiled, and their economic losses and their magnitude is also mentioned here. Volcanic eruption: volcano is an opening or crack in the earth's crust through which magma, gases and ash escape. So magma, that is a molten rock beneath the earth's surface, becomes lava when it erupts from the volcano. So there is a volcanic eruption. So ash goes much higher in the atmosphere. So in India, there are 2 active volcanoes. One is the Barren Island, Andaman Sea, and second is a Batang Island, Andaman Sea. These are the only active volcanoes in India, but there are countries like Indonesia, Japan, which have a lot of active volcanoes. In summary of this lecture, what are the key takeaways? We understood what are the types of hazards, what are the impacts which are crucial for reducing risk and building resilience. Each category we saw in a nutshell, that how they are classified, what are the examples. Also we saw that not all hazards are disasters. What turns hazard into disaster is an exposure or the vulnerable population, which will turn that into a disaster. Also we saw some of the geophysical hazards which are often linked to or triggering to some of the climatic hazards, and a comprehensive picture is provided based on that. So an activity for you based on this lecture: you prepare a list of hazards and disasters that have recently occurred, that is after year 2000 in your region, and what are the impacts. So you can just document whether in your state or district what are the hazards which have taken place, that you can document. So these are some of the additional reference material. So this is a climate hazard and vulnerability atlas of India. So you can refer this website. So it will give you details of all these kind of hazards or disasters which are listed here. So you can refer. There are some additional reference material for you to look over to. So thank you very much for your attention and patience listening. With this we come to the conclusion of present lecture. In the next lecture we will discuss climate change and vulnerability profile of India. If you have any doubts, feel free to contact me on my email. Thank you very much. Signing off for today.